Welcome to Law and Society in Taiwan. Today, we talk about the executive yuan and the control yuan. And here you see a photo of the control yuan, and right opposite of it is the executive yuan. So the executive yuan and the control yuan are located right opposite of each other. Let's start with the executive yuan. According to Article 53 of the Constitution, the executive yuan is the highest administrative organ. In other words, it formulates and implements the policies. And if you go to the homepage of the executive yuan, you can see an overview of the major policies, and they are illustrated on very colorful slides. So I invite you to take a look at that. The executive yuan is composed of a president and a vice president, the ministers, some are called ministers without portfolio, and the chairman of the commissions. According to Article 3 of the additional articles of the Constitution, the executive yuan president is now appointed by the President of the Republic of China. The executive yuan president is also called the premier, who thus is the head of the executive yuan. The premier then recommends the executive yuan vice president, the ministers, and the chairman of the commissions, who are then appointed by the President of the Republic of China. Important to mention here is the Executive Yuan Council, composed of the president, who is also the chairman, the vice president, the ministers, and the chairman of the commissions. And together, this council is also called the cabinet. And the cabinet decides important bills, for example, the statutory or budgetary bills and other important affairs that are then submitted to the legislative yuan. An important law in this context is the Organizational Act of the Executive Yuan, promulgated in 1947, and it has undergone major revisions, especially in 2012 in the course of governmental restructurings. and it was last amended in January 2022 this year. Here you see an overview of the executive Yuan structure. So, according to the law, we currently have 14 ministries, namely for interior affairs, foreign affairs, national defense, finance, education, justice, economic and energy, transportation, labor, agriculture, health and welfare, the environment, culture, and digital affairs. The Ministry for Digital Affairs was inaugurated only this year in 2022. Moreover, we have 9 councils or commissions for national development, national science and technology, mainland affairs, financial supervision, ocean affairs, overseas, Chinese affairs, and others. And finally, we have other institutions such as the central bank. If you go to the homepage of the Executive Yuan, you can take a virtual tour and you get to see the building and what it looks like in the inside. So here I also invite you to take a look at this. And I already mentioned the Ministry of Digital Affairs, or MODA, was inaugurated very recently on the 27th of August 2022. And I also invite you to take a look at their homepage here. So the question for you, who appoints the head of the Executive Yuan? And is the president of the Executive Yuan called A. Minister, B. Commissioner, C. Prosecutor, or D. Premier? Next question. If you could choose to work in one department or agency of the Executive Yuan, which one would you choose and why? The Executive Yuan obviously is very powerful in Taiwan. And as we know, power must be accountable. So this raises the question, to whom is the Executive Yuan accountable? And we find the answer in Article 3 of the additional articles of the Constitution, which says that the Executive Yuan is accountable to the Legislative Yuan. For example, the Executive Yuan has to report its administrative policies to the Legislative Yuan. So this is what we can see often on TV, for example, when the premier or the ministers appear in the Legislative Yuan and report and respond to the interpellations or questions of the legislators. Moreover, the Legislative Yuan has the power to pass a no confidence vote against the premier. And this kind of no confidence vote must be proposed by more than 1/3 of all the Legislative Yuan members, and it must be passed by more than 1/2 of all the legislators. To give you an example of this kind of reporting by the executive yuan to the legislative yuan, if you go to the homepage of the executive yuan, you can find all these reports. And for example, in March this year, 2022, Premier Su delivered an oral policy report to the legislative yuan. And it is interesting to note that he reports about the economic growth rate in Taiwan, which was higher than 6% last year in 2021. And even during the COVID pandemic, the economy of Taiwan has continued to grow. And according to the IMF World Economic Outlook, will be among the world's top 20 economies by 2023. This report also cites some interesting statistics, according to which Taiwan is an economically free country. In fact, it's number six from among 184 countries. It is also a full democracy and even the number one democracy in Asia, and globally, it is number eight. And also in terms of the talents, Taiwan ranks very high. Here it is the number 16 worldwide. Now, when we talk about the budget of the executive yuan, so obviously here, the where does the money come from? How much money can be spent? Here, the constitution requires the executive yuan to present its budgetary bill for the following fiscal year to the legislative yuan 3 months before each fiscal year. And according to Article 60 of the Constitution, within 4 months after the end of a fiscal year, the executive yuan has to present the final accounts of the revenues and expenditures to the control yuan. So the question now for you, how can the executive yuan be held accountable? And this brings me to the control yuan. The status and powers of the control yuan have changed considerably as a result of constitutional amendments, and can now best be described as comparable to that of an ombudsman or a watchdog that watches or supervises the government. The powers are regulated in a law which is called Control Act. And we find some basic provisions concerning the control yuan in Article 7 of the additional articles of the Constitution. So there it states that the control yuan is composed of 29 members, including a president and a vice president. The members serve a term of 6 years, which is renewable, and they are nominated by the President of the Republic of China in Taiwan and appointed with the consent of the Legislative Yuan. The control yuan members shall be beyond party affiliation and exercise their powers independently, and they discharge their responsibilities in accordance with the law. Now, if you look at the powers of the control yuan, it has the power to investigate and to correct. And for this purpose, it can request the executive yuan, the ministries, and the commissions to submit its orders and other documents. It can also set up specialized committees to investigate the executive yuan activities. In particular, it will investigate whether there has been a violation of the law or a neglect of duties. These investigations of the control yuan can be commissioned, which means that the control yuan will entrust related organizations to conduct the investigations. As an alternative, the members of the control yuan can be assigned with an investigation. This is then called an assigned investigation. Or in many cases, the members of the control yuan initiate an investigation by themselves based on people's complaints or other information. And this is then called self initiated investigation. The control yuan can investigate public but also private organizations and to request the assistance of other agencies, including the court and the police. According to Article 97 of the Constitution, the control yuan can propose corrective measures or institute impeachment or also hand over a criminal case to the court. So let's explain the difference here. To correct, to take corrective measures means that the control yuan will correct an executive yuan agency. So here it's the authority or the agency that is being addressed. In comparison, impeachment is addressed with regard to an individual government officer. And this is what we will talk about next. The power to impeach and to censor is enshrined in Article 7 of the additional articles of the Constitution and can be exercised against public functionaries in the central or local government and can also be exercised with regard to personnel of the judicial, examination, and control yuan. The word impeach means to formally accuse, in this case, a public servant for violation of law or neglect of duties. And the consequence of impeachment is that this case will be referred to the disciplinary court of the judicial yuan. And recently, this is now being transmitted online, and this has made the procedure much more efficient. Censor means to criticize or to disapprove of a public servant for violation of law or neglect of duties. But the difference is here that censor happens when the case is urgent. So here we need to take urgent remedy or an immediate action, and we need to suspend the public servant immediately. So then this kind of censor case will be referred to the superior of the public servant, and it is the superior who has to take action. Moreover, the control yuan has the power to audit according to Article 7 of the additional articles of the Constitution. And the power to audit is specified in a law called the Audit Act. For this purpose, an Auditor General is nominated or appointed by the President with the consent of the Legislative Yuan, according to Article 104 of the Constitution. And according to Article 105 of the Constitution, the Auditor General shall, within 3 months, audit the final accounts of the revenues and expenditures presented by the Executive Yuan and submit an auditing report to the Legislative Yuan. And so for this purpose, we have a special national audit office within the control yuan who exercises the power to monitor the government expenditures. Now let's turn to the complaints. This is a very important topic for the people in practice. So who can file a complaint with the control yuan? The answer is anyone. Anyone who finds his or her rights infringed, including non citizens. In other words, you don't need to be a citizen of the Republic of China in Taiwan. Also, foreigners can file a complaint with the control yuan. And what is the content of such a complaint? It can be any unlawful action or misconduct by a government agency or public servant. So, what you need to specify in your complaint is that a government agency or a public servant, a government officer, has acted against the law or otherwise shown misconduct. So anyone then is eligible to lodge this kind of complaint with the control yuan. You have to specify the facts and provide the evidence. But what you don't have to do is to pay fees. So there are no fees when you file a complaint with the control yuan. This leads us to the question how to file your complaint, and here you have many channels for doing so. First of all, you can directly go to the control yuan, and on the first floor, they have a complaints received center where you can file your complaint with a member who is on duty. Second, you can hand your complaint to the control yuan members when they are on a circuit supervision trip. So the members of the control yuan on a regular basis travel around, they go to the cities and the counties, and then you can go there and meet them directly and hand them your complaint. Number three, you can mail or fax your written complaint to the control yuan or directly to a control yuan member. So you find their email on the homepage or the address here is in Taipei City, Zhongxiao East Road, very close to the Taipei main station. And number four, you can also submit your complaint online. And recently, because of the pandemic, it's also possible to use video conferencing. So you see that the control yuan here is making efforts to be modern and also employ the digital or online tools. Here you see the picture. So this complaint receipt office is located on the first floor when you enter the control yuan, and then you will immediately see it. And you get a form which you have to fill out. And here are all the rules that you have to follow. For example, you have to state the fact and provide the evidence. And then here you can fill out the form. And now we have some questions for you. Guess how many complaints the control yuan received in 2021? Was it about 14 complaints that were filed, or about 400, or about 4,000? Or do you think it was more than 14,000 complaints? Guess how many investigation cases were then launched by the control yuan in 2021 as a result of those complaints? Do you think it was fewer than 20, fewer than 100, or about 100 to 200 investigation cases? Or do you think it was more than 200 investigation cases that were launched by the control yuan? Conclusion: the executive is a powerful branch of the government under the leadership of the premier that formulates and implements national policies. It is accountable to the legislative yuan and also subject to the supervision of the control yuan. Anyone can make a suggestion or complaint. So, following this theoretical discourse and the introduction, I will now take you on a tour through the control yuan. Here you see the main entrance of the control yuan, and you can also find a video on the homepage of the control yuan. It's called Introduction of the Control Yuan, and this video also provides you with an overview of the history and the powers and the development of the control yuan. So this is also a very interesting reference.
This is the main entrance, and let's go in here. And normally we can see the round dome, 15 meters high, but right now it's being renovated because this building is already 107 years old. So this beautiful dome, where you can see the glass ceiling and watch the sky, is being renovated right now and will be renovated up until next year. Next year in spring, then we can see the original. And that part over there was completed in 1915, and that was during the Japanese colonial period. With a very beautiful garden on the inside. And we now go into this meeting room. This meeting room is where the control yuan members, the 29 control yuan members, meet to make the most important decisions. So here we have an explanation why Taiwan's government is divided into 5 powers. Most Western countries divide the governmental power into 3 branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. But in China, we have 2 more traditional branches, namely the examination yuan and the control yuan. And the founding father of the Republic of China, Dr. Sun Yat-sen, he combined these two systems. So he took the 3 branches plus the 2 traditional branches of China to combine it together to the 5 branches. That's why in Taiwan now we have the 5 branches. So it's a mixture between the Western system and the Eastern system. And in order to exercise this power of supervision, it is very important that the control yuan also has the power to investigate. Here you can see the members of the control yuan, and we also have the special investigation officers or personnel, can take this card, the authorization card, and directly go to the public or private organizations to conduct the investigations, to take a look at the files and at the records and the documents. So this is the first step. Next, the control yuan can suggest or prescribe corrective measures for the executive yuan. And the executive yuan then has a few months time to make the improvement and has to report whether or not they have made this kind of improvement. In serious cases, the control yuan can impeach. Impeach means to formally accuse the public functionaries at all levels of the central and local government. So this is in serious cases. And finally, there is the possibility or the power to censor. And this is possible when it is important to take urgent action. So immediate action, for example, to suspend a public officer, then here the control yuan has the power to exercise its power of censor. Several times a year, the members of the control yuan also directly go to the cities and the counties, and this is called circuit supervision. And the date, the time will be published, and this is also an opportunity for the people to file a complaint with the members of the control yuan. So I think this is also very important, right? That the members of the control yuan, they don't hide in the building or in the office. They really go out to the people and to have a look at the administration, whether or not there are any problems. International Ombudsman Institute, IOI, is an international organization with the headquarters in Vienna, Austria. And our control yuan in Taiwan became a member of this International Ombudsman Institute in 1994. So it's almost 30 years that we have been a member. So the function of the control yuan is comparable to that of an ombudsman.
And last, but perhaps most importantly, we had the privilege to have an interview with a Control Yuan member. I started with a question, namely, what is the difference between the Control Yuan and the Legislative Yuan? Would it be possible or feasible to merge them and adopt a governmental system with 3 powers instead of the 5 powers that we currently have? Listen to the interview and express your own opinion.
立法院跟监察院的差别，最主要是立法院它拥有这个立法权、预算审查权、质询权。那监察院的是监察权。什么是监察权？监察权没有办法去过问立法权，因为5院是平行的。那我们只监督行政院。那监督行政体系，除了总统、副总统以外，我们都监督得到，所以院长也监督得到。那监察院的是监察法规定是，我们监督的公务员有没有依法行政，好，或者是说你所宣示的政策，你有没有这个真的照你的政策去做，好，所以我们纠谈的是公务员的这个违法失职或疏忽，或者是说他应作为而不作为。那如果真的有违法的话，还可以弹劾、纠举，那我们对于这个机关是纠正，对于这个公务员是弹劾，那不过弹劾呢，还要经过以前的公务员惩戒委员会，现在的惩戒法院，法庭这个去判定说，这个，所以有时候监察院的弹劾并不一定真的就会实现，它还要经过司法院，这个惩戒法院是属于司法院的那一关这样子，所以是用这样子做区分的，跟
立法院他们是立法的，但是他们也有权利邀请那个行政院长过去，然后报告。咨询，对，
我们比较少把行政院长请来啦，因为我们通常是对于这个单一的事件，譬如说，你这一个像这个我有给大家资料哈，我的巧克力案就是食药署的嘛，那其他人可能是针对教育部或者是国防部，那比较。顶多是纠正行政院，譬如说我们最近有一个叫做三老鼠的这个盗发国有林的这个的案子调查，那因为它横跨了农委会还有因为有这个外籍移工也跑去做三老鼠，牵涉到内政部，还有判刑的时候你的法务部司法院的事情，所以后来我们就觉得跨这么多部会，台湾也不大，你这个问题几十年都没有办法处理，所以我们就纠正了行政院。那监察委员，这个你独立行使职权，但是你写的这个调查报告还是要通过各委员会的审查。那立法委员呢，他的这个质询就是他自己负责。那谁可以监督立法委员？是人民，所以监察委员也不会去过问立法委员的事，因为他是人民负责监督的。变成3个有几个前提，譬如说外国的国会很多都是2院制，众议院、参议院或上议院、下议院，但是我们是单一国会，所以你这个像在美国，你这些你这个法案过了，还是要送到另外一个国会去，在这个时候就可以互相的制衡或是协商。如果有的是比较怎么讲， 至少他有一关帮他做把关，最后才去送到总统那边。那我们是单一国会，那单一国会，你如果说要把这个监察权给这个国会的话，那我们要看看我们现在国会的状况啊，就是说我们的国会，因为根据我们的台湾的监察院的权力，事实上跟一般外国的监察使比较起来，我们的权力相对是大得多。我们可以拿着我们的监察证，我们可以去军队里面带走这个资料。那除非那个军队的这个指挥官或者是营区的这个指挥官证明说我带走的资料有害国家安全，可以不给我带走，否则我可以把宪兵找来当场做笔录，我们把资料带走。所以我们就想象一个状况，如果我们现在我们在这个讨论的时候，我们有几个在国防方面让我们很担心的委员，如果他们拥有这样的监察权，可以去军队里面带走他们想带走的文件，那这个事情就会很严重啊。那然后我们的立法委员现在已经有了质询权，有了预算审查权，有了言论免责权。如果他还有监察权，他可以弹劾、纠举，然后还有纠正机关。然后我想这个官员被他叫到这个办公室，要求他说我的选区你要给我这个给我那个，现在我的金主来了，我要这个我要那个，我看官员很难抵挡。那个时候对于人民对于国家是好是坏，这个大家真的要想清楚了哈。那当然也有人讲说，那就不要把监察权直接给我们立法委员，我们就设监察委员或监察使，就放在立法院里面。那你放在立法院里面，它就等于是在这个立法院院长的这个管理，至少是行政管理之下。那大家想一想哈，立法院院长是怎么选出来的？是他所属的政党的国会议员占多数，他才有办法成为这个被推选成立法院院长。所以当一个监察委员他所监察的对象、调查的对象是执政党非常在乎的人或者是议题的时候，这个监察委员是不是还可以像现在一样独立于立法院之外，我们可以这样子非常至少相对客观的、公平的去处理事情。好，那譬如说，如果一样在立法院下面，这很像是同一个学校里面的甲班、乙班。那这个某政党的党团认为你这个监察委员调查的事情他看不顺眼，或者是你调查的太快或太慢，他看不顺，他随时都可以在立法院里面这个提起质询、发难，或者是隔空这个指责。那这个监察委员非常难做事。那至少到目前呢，我们还维持一个相对互相尊重。譬如说，当然他们有时候立法院会说，为什么这个案你不查，为什么这个案，但是他还不至于敢跟我们说，为什么这个案你查的那么慢，为什么这个案你查那么快啊？那为什么你要去查这个案哈？所以我的意思是说，他顶多是说，这个叫我们为什么我们他认为该查我们没有查。但有时候我们有很多的这个状况，不是全部都要对外去说明的。根据监察法，我们所有的调查行为是保密的，我们的不得对外宣泄的那个条文没有任何但书，比这个检调单位还严格。你看检调单位抓了几个立委，哇，弄到每一家媒体都在那边报。但是我们如果监察委员这样做事，我们马上就会有事，不可以宣泄。所以我们而且监察院调查的案子呢，譬如说我调查这个山老鼠案，调查了1年多，立法院是不能容许这种速度的，它是讲究短兵相接，讲究这个隔空交火。立法院是民主政治设计出来政党对决的场合，那你把监察委员或监察权放在一个就是设计来，我不是说他政党对决错误，而是这个场域本来就是政党对决的场域， 所以为什么在国外你要把这个监察权给国会，那至少是要双国会。那像现在这种状况之下，我是觉得说，大家是不是考虑双国会，再来考虑说监察权把它归属。所以我常说，废监察院我没有意见，但是呢，监察院里面住了一个很重要的权，叫做监察权。这个监察权先想清楚要放在哪里，你不要把房子拆了才发现这里面有一个很需要保护的脆弱的一个物品或者是一个人物，你把它露宿街头，这个就会出问题。所以你在监察院，你不同的，像我们上一届张博雅当行政院长的末期，我们后来是蔡英文总统提名的这些监委我们进来，然后我们跟马英九所提名的监委，我们绝对不会去讨论问题，讨论到打起来，绝对不会。但是在立法院为什么会？因为那是政党竞逐的场域，是合法的设计出来政党竞逐的场域，那个就是放手竞逐。这个设计是大家讨论这个报告，这个报告里面，你认为我的报告你哪里不改？你要讲出来哪一句话要怎么改，讲不出来，这个就是你要让我过。所以论的都是这份报告到委员会去，到底几分？你讲得出来我哪里错？
The second question that I discussed with the Control Yuan member was regarding the International Ombudsman Institute called IOI, which is a worldwide organization headquartered in Vienna, Austria. And the Control Yuan is a member of the IOI since 1994. So I wanted to ask whether from an international comparative perspective, whether the Control Yuan qualifies as an ombudsman.
对，
是算一个 ombudsman，
绝对算，绝对算。然后我们也是这个 IOI 的会员，所以我们刚开始进来的时候有一个困扰，我们不知道监察院什么时候被人家翻译成 Control 院，我就觉得非常怪异，而且不解。然后我们那时候小英总统提名我们进来，我们就讨论。后来他们说我们其他的委员就是说比我们资深的说，他们进来的时候他们也都讨论过，他们非常不满意这一个翻译。但是他说，因为我们加入 IOI 的时候就是这个名称。
And finally, I discussed a case that really happened only a few years ago and had a great impact for Taiwan because it improved Taiwan's food safety law. And after comparing with other major jurisdictions such as the European Union, the Taiwanese legislative adopted a legal definition for food additives. So food additives is something that's added to the food, and it's important for the people, for the consumers, to know which food additives have been added, and so this has to be displayed on the label. And the problem here was that there was no clear definition in the law for food additives. And this definition has now been added in the law, and this makes it clear that the food additives fall within the scope of the food safety law. And this happened at the recommendation of the Control Yuan. So it was the Control Yuan here who requested this, initiated this, and then talked to the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in Taiwan, and they eventually then proposed a bill that was sent to the legislative, and the legislative yuan then passed this amendment in 2019. So the discussion with the Control Yuan here explains why the executive authority at first hesitated to bring such a proposal or bill, and also various factors affecting the legislative procedure. For example, from the following interview, we will understand the practical application of laws, that the legislative yuan cares about the opinion of the executive authorities, because it's they have to execute and apply the laws. So when they have any concerns, the legislators normally will listen to them. And we also learn about the limited resources and the limited time of the legislative yuan. For example, the limited financial resources to pay the assistants who really do the research at the legislative yuan. And thus, sometimes it's difficult for them to prepare all the bills and the draft laws. And sometimes or often they also lack the professional expertise, and that's also a reason why most often the bills are drafted by the executive authorities, because that's where the experts sit, because these are the people who deal with these issues on an everyday basis.
你们这样子给他们的一个建议，他们也可以接受，他们
对，因为我们指出很多问题来，那他们也承认这个，他们当时来监察院给我们的说法是说，因为立法呢，每次在立法院立法都吵很久，
对，
然后这个非常的不容易，但是我是反驳他们，我说我在立法院参加了大概至少6次的，5次6次，反正我的那11年任期，只要有食安法，我绝对从头参加到底。从来没有听到食药署说我们的加工助剂需要一个法律的依据，那没有法律依据，你自己去生出一个，因为你要所有的规定都要有一个母法，依据这母法我定了什么执法，结果没有，你跑出一个执法，所以我说你这个绝对是违法的。然后后来他们也很难自圆其说，他们只能够说为什么没有送到立法院去，然后我跟他讲说这不是理由，因为呢在立法院当时随着食安风暴修了很多次食安法，你没有一次把这个东西送进来。那有时候譬如说立法委员的助理有限，所以他可能食安风暴的时候，他通常比较重视说，我来提高这个罚则，罚金，或者是这个如果是你违法，你要入狱的这个年份这样子。那我加了这个其他的，譬如说这个我们的非基改，那个基改食品的标示，还有很多很多，那但是你加工助剂这个时候修了那么多次，你就应该把它送进来嘛，你都没有，而且呢，食药署尤其是行政单位，最后这个法律是要给行政单位执行，所以行政单位如果站起来说，你立法委员改了我的版本，会造成我执行上的什么困难，通常立法委员是不敢随便坚持的。那执政党的委员也不会让这个在野党的立委随便乱改到让这个执政的这个团队无法执行，因为我们的国会的助理的功能没有办法像美国那样，像美国有些就是一请40几个，我们如果请10来个，那已经非常了不起了。那你要研究的各种各样的法案非常的多，所以通常就是花时间在研究，通常就是行政单位去把草案弄出来送到立法院。那行政单位有时候他还有资源去委托这个知名的律师事务所或者是法律学者帮他们草拟这个整部的这个法律草案。
所以那时候就是你们跟食药署讲啊，他们可以接受，他们就提一个法案，然后送给立法院，立法院就通过了。
对，
所以程序上就是这样子。
因为这很专业，大部分的立委老师讲也没有办法在
立法院也不会
是。
所以这是一个很大的贡献嘛，因为这个是法律有改嘛，这个是很难的啊。
对，
法律要改比较难，比那个法规，行政的法规要改都比较容易。
对，它是等于一个本来没有的这个法条，它增加。
现在有，对。
This concludes our course for today.